Our special guest today is Dr. Marie Murphy. Dr. Murphy is a non-judgmental coach for people involved in infidelity. She is trained and certified as a life coach, with her training come from the Life Coach School and Martha Beck's Wayfinder Life Coach Training. Her bachelor's degree is in sociology and human sexuality studies from San Francisco State University, and she earned a Ph.D. in the sociology of sexuality from the University of California at San Diego. For years, she researched and taught about many things related to sex, sexuality, love, romantic relationships, and family life. Her training and work in these realms have given her countless insights into the human experience and how we can deal with the many challenges associated with being human. Dr. Marie Murphy, welcome to Next Steps Forward.
Thank you, Chris. It's so nice to be here with you today.
No, I appreciate your time. And this is obviously a fascinating topic, an uncomfortable topic.
Yeah.
Your work is especially interesting because you help people who are actively cheating or actively engaging in some kind of infidelity. Many people think of cheaters as bad people, and not just bad people, but terrible people, absolute worst kind of people. Why is it important for there to be support and empathy, or at least understanding, for people who are actively cheating and not just for folks who are being cheated on?
Yeah, great question. So first and foremost, even if we don't like infidelity, even if we don't like the idea of being cheated on, we've got to recognize that cheating is a very human thing. And for better or worse, it's a very common human thing. And so first and foremost, if humans are engaging in this behavior, we've got to have some human empathy for them. There are brothers and sisters, there are siblings just trying to make their way through life in this world, trying to figure their things out. And why would we not want to have support and compassionate assistance available for these folks? That's one thing. But the other thing is, if people want to stop cheating, which some people most certainly do, stopping with, well, you're a bad person and you're doing something bad doesn't get anyone anywhere, right?
You just said you suspect some people don't want to stop cheating.
That's true.
Really?
Yes, I not only suspect that, I have lots of evidence of that.
What is in the DNA of somebody who's like that?
Well, I mean, we have to remember that humans aren't necessarily designed to be monogamous in any sort of innate way. And some people like to have a stable relationship and then other things going on the side. And there are certainly ways to do this ethically, right? That's an option. But not everyone sees that as an option for them, rightly or wrongly. And some folks do choose to stay in a committed and ostensibly monogamous relationship and cheat habitually or continuously.
I have a feeling I'm going to learn a lot today.
Every day, right?
Exactly. That's why we're here.
Yes.
So I suspect that the people who are cheating have something missing in their life. Is there a common denominator of what that missing ingredient is?
Well, it depends, right? I mean, some people, the thing that's missing in their life is something in their relationship that they would like to have. So it's not that they're in the wrong career and they're deeply miserable or they're lacking excitement and they need to find that in some other way or another. For some people, it's really something that's absent from their primary relationship that they don't know what to do about. And so cheating sort of either intentionally or unintentionally becomes the way they meet those missing needs. But to your point, for some people, it is that they, are dying to write the next great novel and they just can't find it in them to sit their butt in the chair and write every day. And having an affair is a lovely distraction from that kind of angst.
Is there, I'll say, a common theme in terms of how infidelity starts? Is it, people on business trips or conferences or someone from your kid's sports team?
All of those things that you mentioned do happen. Yes. And we have to remember that infidelity comes in so many different shapes and sizes. We tend to think of the kind of classic example of someone who's married having an affair with someone else. And that certainly is one sort of infidelity situation. But there are so many others. So without, getting encyclopedic about it, that what you describe or the things you described certainly are patterns that I see, but there are so many others as well.
And maybe as a follow-up, a little bit more detail, what are some of the most common reasons your clients cite for cheating on their partners?
So this is a biggie that I think everyone should know about. A lot of folks find themselves in a committed relationship that they're, moderately to severely unhappy in, and they don't know what to do about it. And so whether by design or by happenstance, they find themselves connecting with someone else, and that person's amazing. And oh my God, they feel more alive than they have in years and everything's wonderful. And all of a sudden they're officially having an affair. And it's kind of like, oh my God, how did this happen? Sometimes. And sometimes, Ashley Madison has however many million users it has for a reason, right? Some people are intentionally and deliberately seeking this out.
From your perspective, how often is this situation of a partner not meeting the cheater's emotional needs? And how often is this situation where no matter what that partner does, it's not going to stop the other person from cheating?
Yeah, both scenarios are common, right? We love to have this, well, I don't know about everyone thinks this way, but a lot of people think that it's either, there's something missing in the relationship and that can be solved, or there's nothing a partner can do and it's always something that's like fundamentally wrong with the cheater. It's not necessarily an either or type thing. Both of those things do happen, but sometimes it's a little bit of both and sometimes it's neither.
And what are some of the common myths about people who cheat that do not line up with reality?
Yeah. So one of the common myths we hear is that people who cheat are selfish, narcissistic sociopaths or psychopaths that don't have any concern for other people's feelings. And I do not see that to be true in my work with clients at all.
How'd you get into this line of work? It's very niche, for lack of a better word.
Yes, it certainly is. So the short answer to that question is that I've always been interested in the things that other people find taboo or stigmatized or untouchable. And I've always been interested in finding a way to treat stigmatized aspects of human behavior in a more neutral and constructive way. That's the short answer. The longer answer is much longer, and I actually devoted 2 episodes of my own podcast to addressing that question recently. So if you want the long answer, you can go look up my podcast, which is called Your Secret is Safe with Me.
And where can we find that? What platforms?
Yeah, it's on all the platforms, and it's on my website, which is mariemurphyphd.com.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
I just finished my doctorate a few months ago, and I'm looking here again.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I had a lot more hair 3 years ago when I started.
Right?
Would have never known there's a degree in the sociology of sexuality.
Yeah, so I'm a sociologist by training, and my concentration is in sexuality, the sociological study of sexuality. And even within sociology, sexuality isn't like one of the main subfields like inequalities or race or gender, but it sure is an important one. We need more sociologists studying sexuality.
No question. So, Marie, what are some of the things you see in your work with clients who are cheating that you think might surprise the general public?
Yeah. So as I said earlier, people who cheat are not necessarily the selfish, narcissistic, conniving jerks that we think they are. Some people are doing what they're doing without concern for other people's feelings. But a lot of folks I work with struggle mightily with the actual consequences or imagined consequences of their actions upon other people's lives. And one of the things that makes infidelity situations so hard to deal with is people's fear, or I should say maybe terror, of hurting people they care about and disrupting the lives of people they care about. And that fear is often what keeps people kind of stuck or paralyzed or in a state of long-term indecision about what to do about their infidelity situation.
You touched on this earlier. Different people have different definitions of what infidelity is.
Yes.
To one person, it may be a physical relationship. To another, it may be texting a coworker after hours. Do you find that cheaters tend to have a narrower definition of infidelity?
Not really. I mean, I see some folks who are like, well, all right, I didn't have a secret family with this person, so it wasn't really cheating. But most of the folks I work with, and of course, my clientele is a self-selecting audience, so this isn't necessarily representative of everyone who cheats, but most of the folks I work with have very, what's the right word? Very all-encompassing definitions of cheating. And in fact, some people who have paid for my help have considered it cheating if they're thinking about someone else, right? So not all cheaters are like, oh yeah, I can get away with the technicalities here. Ha ha ha, no problem. This isn't really cheating.
So as a sociologist, I'm sure there have been some studies done in terms of the percentage of the population that are cheaters.
So I have a lot to say about the research on infidelity. And I won't say it all, but let me say a few things. One is it's hard to get good data on stigmatized behaviors, secretive behaviors. It's hard to get good well, that's another story. So a lot of times people come to me and they say, well, like I've seen the statistics on this, this, and this, and this. And I would say if you're not scrutinizing the study design, if you're not being a sophisticated consumer of the research, you may want to take the numbers you read with a grain of salt. We really don't know what percentage of the population is engaging in infidelity, and that's due in part to the fact that people define infidelity in so many different ways. It's hard to capture what's the full picture of what's going on out there.
That's interesting. And do you think another part of it would be just that they don't trust that the information is going to be confidential?
Oh, sure. Yeah, that is a thing in research for sure. If you don't trust your interviewer or you don't trust the data collection instrument, people do not give truthful answers for sure.
So there are emotional affairs and physical affairs. Is one more damaging to a relationship than the other? And because we sometimes see stories that partners' emotional affair is more hurtful to women than a physical affair, does the question of emotional versus physical differ by gender?
So what I see is that what counts as hurtful really varies from person to person. And I don't know that things break down along gender lines as neatly as we might like to imagine. For instance, that being on the receiving or being cheated on when your partner's having an emotional affair is necessarily more hurtful to women. Not necessarily. Maybe if we were to design some really rigorous and robust study, we'd find that, but that's not what I see in my practice. People are hurt by all kinds of things. That's what it boils down to.
Is there a typical age range, or is it or gender in terms of percentage-wise, male versus female?
So across the board, the most honest answer is I don't know. In my practice, I see clients who range in age from their 20s to their 70s. And over time, the breakdown of my clients has been roughly equal in terms of women and men. Although for the last 6 to 9 months or so, I've had 3/4 men, and I'm not really sure what that's about. I don't know what to attribute that to.
And maybe one more question regarding research and studies.
Yeah.
Is there any data out there in terms of who is the first instigator, male or female, percentage-wise?
If we're talking about an affair that has a man and a woman involved in it, who starts the affair?
Correct.
I don't know of any research like that. Okay. And I would say that what counts as starting an affair or instigating an affair is really hard to define. Right?
Fair point.
Is it the first look? Is it the first text message that isn't strictly about business or baseball or neighborhood business? Is it the first kiss? Is it the first time you take your clothes off together? Is it the first time you say I love you? Who knows? What's the starting point?
A lot of what ifs there.
Yeah.
Does the fact that different people have different beliefs about infidelity complicate relationships? And does it make your work more challenging when you counsel couples?
I'll answer the second question first. So when I work with couples, I'm working with affair couples. I'm working with the people who are involved in the illicit affair, so to speak. And what's really interesting, and this might surprise people, is that even affair couples have their own sense of what counts as not okay or what counts as infidelity within that relationship. So for instance, if one member of the affair couple is married or partnered and the other member isn't, and the member of the affair couple who isn't in a committed relationship starts dating other people, the person who's in that committed relationship may see that as cheating, even though, officially they're committed to someone else, right? Furthermore, the member of the affair couple who isn't ostensibly in a committed relationship may see it as cheating if their affair partner does certain things with their spouse. Right? Like go on vacation with them or have sex with them or tell them that they love them or go out to dinner for more than 2 hours, right? So the answer to the second question is, yeah, different definitions of infidelity definitely make relationships complicated. And there are some, therapists and coaches out there that advise getting really specific about what you consider to be monogamy in order to prevent these sorts of misunderstandings. And I think that to an extent, that's great. Stipulating your boundaries in relationships is a great thing to do. And what I see a lot is that even when couples have really clearly outlined, like, this is what counts as cheating to me, this is what's okay with me, that doesn't necessarily prevent infidelity from happening.
So walk and talk us through from a 30,000-foot level, obviously for confidentiality reasons. You just mentioned how you counsel couples that are in the affair.
Yes.
How does that work? Are you trying to help them figure out where they want to stay together, help them move back apart?
So generally speaking, my agenda as a coach is to help people take responsibility for what they have the power to control and to learn how to develop a more productive relationship with the things they don't have the power to control. And so one example of what this looks like in affair and infidelity situations is that people think that other people have the power to make choices for them or determine how things unfold for them. And that's not exactly how it works. And so what I help people do, or one of the things I help people do, is start to take their power back. So for instance, with affair couples, sometimes it's like, well, I can't leave my partner until my affair partner leaves their partner. And so my affair partner is making me continue cheating because they haven't left their spouse yet. No, that's not what's happening. You have the power to stop engaging in what you think counts as infidelity if you want to, no matter what your affair partner does or doesn't do. Now, obviously, it's more complicated than that. That's why people need my help. And it's that, I'm giving you the quick and dirty answer, so to speak. But in practice, is it harder than that to work out? Sure it is. There's a lot of human difficulty built into these kinds of questions and challenges and decisions.
That's fascinating. I would have never thought of it as counseling the couples who are the cheaters, for lack of a word, not the couples trying to get back together.
Yeah. A lot of people do that. Plenty of people do that. The affair couples need help too.
And I know you're non-judgmental. That's why people come to see you. How do you shelve that in terms of viewing a couple, in terms of whether they're trying to figure out how to stay together, knowing that they could be destroying two other families based on their actions? It's got to weigh on you a bit.
Not destroying two other families is a really strong word, right? We tend to think in these terms. We tend to think that cheating is bad. And if you leave a marriage or an established relationship to be with your affair partner, then you're destroying a family. But we've got to be really scrupulous about examining the extent to which that is true in any absolute sense. Is it possible to leave a relationship badly? Sure it is. But people do that all the time anyway, regardless of whether infidelity is a factor in that or not. Is it possible to leave a relationship as compassionately and respectfully and deliberately as possible? Yeah, it is. And that might be sad if a relationship ends, but it isn't necessarily an indication that anything's gone wrong in the cosmic scheme of things.
And would the person, the couple on the other side who's being cheated on, would they have that same viewpoint?
It depends. I mean, it's one of the problems with getting locked into this like cheating is terrible thing is that it really puts people who have been cheated on in this position where it's easy to get into an I'm the victim way of looking at the whole situation. And that's not helpful. To be clear, if you've been cheated on and you don't like that, that is fair enough. That is legitimate. But things happen every single day that we don't like. And it's one thing to acknowledge, hey, this has happened and I don't like it. Now, what am I going to do about it? And it's another thing to say, like, this is terrible. I'm a victim. Like, my life is ruined. Right?
Well, I think that's a great point. It goes back to your earlier statement about taking control of the things you can control.
Yeah.
And a moment ago, I mentioned the word destroying. You just, I won't say mocked, but sort of layered onto that saying cheating is terrible.
Yeah.
How do cultural attitudes towards infidelity influence individuals' decisions to cheat? And America was founded on Puritan principles. How does that influence infidelity in our country versus others?
Yeah, so I'm going to punt on the last part of the question. Getting into like cross-cultural comparisons is territory that we might want to save for another day.
For the next show, that's fine.
But I will say that I think that the whole like Puritan notions that American society is founded on make it a lot harder for us to deal with infidelity collectively. And this goes back to what I was just saying about, the idea that people who are cheated on are these victims. That's not helpful for anyone. And when cheaters or people who are actively cheating think like, oh my God, I'm this terrible person. I'm either bad or I'm good. And since I'm cheating, I'm bad. That tends to stop people in their tracks, which often means that they continue doing whatever it is they're doing that they feel bad about. Not helpful for anybody, right? If we want a way out of the maze, we have to ease off of our very dualistic black and white, good or bad, right or wrong thinking. We've got to offer people a path out or a next step forward, right?
Thanks for the plug. Appreciate that. Can we delve into understanding one-time cheaters versus serial cheaters? How are the two different psychologically, emotionally, behaviorally, ethically, and situationally, or are there any differences?
Yeah, I mean, I do see differences in my practice. And so some folks find themselves having an affair or engaging in some kind of infidelity. And they're like, okay, I understand why this has happened. I understand how I got here, but I don't like this at all. This is incredibly stressful and overwhelming. I don't like a lot of the things that go along with this. I'm never doing this again. On the other hand, there are I'm going to talk loosely about two categories of serial cheaters. Some people decide on purpose that they are going to cheat. Some people decide that they are going to cheat to stay married. Some people decide that they are going to remain in their committed relationship and engage in infidelity. And some people don't feel all that bad about it. Some people do feel really bad about it, but they continue to do it anyway. That's their choice, right? Now, on the other hand, some people who cheat habitually, I tried to say habituously there, that's not a word, are doing it in a more compulsive way. And they don't necessarily want to keep cheating habitually, but they find themselves doing it over and over and over again. And when that's going on, what I find is that there's often a deeper layer of discomfort in that person's life that they're kind of using cheating intentionally or unintentionally as a way of avoiding or as a way of buffering from or a way of kind of like self-medicating, shall we say. And I just want to stress that we're all doing this to one degree or another, right? Those of us who are addicted to checking the news every 10 seconds or looking at our smartphone just to see if we've gotten that next email are doing something that is categorically similar. So this isn't about like these big, bad, compulsive cheaters that have all of these crazy problems. What they're doing is on the continuum of what most humans are doing these days, which is finding ways of distracting ourselves from discomfort that we don't know what else to do with.
So my wife has a saying, you always get caught, no matter what it is. Stealing from your little league, infidelity. The people that you talk to, do they think they're going to get away with it forever?
First of all, for the most part, I don't make blanket statements like you always get caught. Maybe your wife's right. I don't know, right? But since I don't know that for sure, I don't know that you always get caught, and I certainly see that some people don't get caught, at least for a long time. That said, a lot of folks are pretty concerned about getting caught. A lot of folks are like, I don't want to keep doing this, and I certainly don't want to keep doing this to the point at which I might get caught. That would be terrible for everyone. Now, do people get caught? Sure they do. And one of the few kind of normative prescriptions that I am willing to put out there is, you don't want to get caught. You really don't want to get caught. It's not a nice thing for anyone involved in the equation. And what I try to help people do is, make decisions about how they're going to handle their infidelity situation before it comes to that. But it does come to that. And there's, nothing I can do to single-handedly stop that from happening.
What behavioral patterns or personality traits are common among serial cheaters? There has to be some level of deceptiveness. And how much do impulsivity and thrill-seeking behavior contribute to serial cheating?
Yeah. So, deception is usually baked into or if not all, then most infidelity situations, whether it's a one-time thing or whether it's someone who's serially cheating. And, that's the difference that I would suggest is that folks who cheat over and over again and do so fairly intentionally have a higher tolerance for engaging in deception than other people do, right? That's kind of I say this lightly, but it's kind of a prerequisite. It's kind of the price of admission. If you enjoy cheating on an ongoing basis or habitually, you have to be willing to deal with the discomfort that often, but not always, comes with engaging in deception.
Marie, we've been talking about your profession and clients, and we'll get back to that. But let's take a minute for you to tell us about you beyond your career. I'm very interested to hear more about the two aspects of your life. The first is your decision to serve as a Peace Corps volunteer in Zambia and your time there. And the second is about your self-described fanatic passion about certain condiments. Take it from here.
Okay. Yeah. So when I was starting in high school, I volunteered as a sexual health and HIV prevention peer educator. And that fed into my undergraduate studies, sexuality and human sexuality studies. And it was incredibly important to me to A, see more of the world beyond the United States, and B, to learn more about the scope of HIV prevention efforts worldwide. And the Peace Corps sent me to Zambia, and I spent 3.5 years there. I traveled all over the country. I lived in a rural village in a mud hut without electricity or running water for a while. I lived in the capital, Lusaka, for a while, and I also traveled to all of the outlying provinces in Zambia. They say the Peace Corps is the toughest job you'll ever love. I don't know if it's the toughest. I've had a lot of really tough jobs, but it's certainly a job that I loved, and I don't know who I would be without having served in the Peace Corps in Zambia. Also, on the subject of condiments, I don't know if I would have discovered some of the best hot sauces in the world were it not for my time in Southern Africa. One of my favorite condiments is nali hot sauce. It's made in Malawi. And back when I was in Zambia, you could only get it in Malawi. You had to go to Malawi to get some nali, but now it's available on the internet. So you too can order yourself some nali and enjoy it as much as I do.
I've never heard of that before, but I'm definitely going to order some after this. I'm sure it's on Amazon.
I would think. I haven't checked lately, but I would think so and hope so.
You're also a certified holistic health practitioner and yoga teacher. Yeah. You taught meditation for many years, as I mentioned before. Do those experiences help you with your own well-being, and do you recommend them to the people you care for?
Yes, these experiences have helped me immensely with my own well-being. And in ways that I won't get into, they also have really impacted the work I do now. There are so many ingredients in the soup that is my approach to non-judgmental infidelity coaching. And these ways of understanding and working with the human experience were definitely important ingredients in that soup. But for me personally, I don't know where I would be without my yoga practice. I don't know how I would still survive in my body if it weren't for my yoga practice, right? I don't know how I would get through a day without meditating. That's not to say that these practices are what everybody has to start doing right now. I'm not a pusher, but they sure have helped me. It's helped a lot of other people too.
We've had a big focus in the show in the mental health space and certainly in the post-COVID world.
Yeah.
And meditation has been a big part of people's responses to that. And there's obviously all different sorts and types of how-tos for meditation.
Yeah.
What's your preference or what's your style?
My style is a total mishmash. My most formal stint, I almost said bout, that's probably not the right word, of meditation training came from the Wat Ram Pung in Chiang Mai, Thailand, not to be confused with the Wat Ram Pun near Chiang Mai, Thailand. I went to the wrong temple. Long story.
Who would have thought?
Yeah. Pronunciation matters, people. Got to get it right. So my most formal training is in Vipassana meditation, but really I mix and match from all sorts of different styles. And what matters the most to me is that I sit down at my altar every day and I do it.
Why is the role of non-judgmental coach so unique? Is it because the stigma of infidelity is so strong?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I hate to say this, and I say this as lovingly as possible, but even professionals who have been trained to offer support to people doing all sorts of things tend to have a lot of biases towards folks who are actively cheating, towards the folks who are engaging in infidelity. And I think that this is because antipathy towards people who cheat is so pervasive in our society. It's baked into everything. It's just circulating in the air we breathe. We take it for granted that cheating is this really, really bad thing. And that's kind of the only way we're able to see it. So it's so important to be able to get away from that if we want to productively deal with infidelity in different ways. If we want people who are cheating to have access to compassionate, respectful assistance that's actually helpful to them, that meets them where they are and respects where they're coming from. And as we've talked about already, for folks who are being cheated on, getting boxed into like the cheater is bad and I'm the victim that something bad happened to isn't necessarily all that helpful. It might sound neat and tidy, but it's not necessarily the way forward.
We were talking before the break about one-time cheaters and serial cheaters. In the spirit of not being judgmental, but being realistic, it seems to me that many cheaters will use the excuse, it just happened. How do you get cheaters to take responsibility for their actions? And is it necessary for them to take the responsibility in order for everyone to be able to move forward?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of everybody taking responsibility, right? I think that's really important in general. In terms of getting cheaters to take responsibility, I don't really consider it my job to try and get anyone to do anything. The people who come to me want help, right? They want something to change and they don't know how to get to that change that they desire. Or sometimes they don't know how to define or claim what they want to change, right? So for people who come to me, it's not a question of me trying to get them to do anything. It's me giving them the tools and practices that they need to get what they want or to do what they want or to be able to accomplish what they want to accomplish.
You touched on this briefly in the first half of the show. Looking at the other side of that coin, for the one-time cheater, is there a certain element of being surprised to find themselves in an emotional or physical relationship they didn't expect?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this ties into the, like, it just happened thing. Like, sometimes it really does seem like cheating just happens. Like, oh my God, I wasn't planning on this. And this just kind of happened, right? Sometimes there's alcohol involved, right? Sometimes there are other substances involved, and sometimes not. Sometimes it's just a matter of like, oh, this person is a really good friend. Wait, all of a sudden we started kissing. Oh, whoa, what happened? And, sometimes when this happens, it's really just that. It's like, oops, I slipped into something that I didn't mean to slip into. I don't want to do that again. The end. Right. And then the question becomes, do I tell my partner I cheated on them or not? And I help people answer that question for themselves all the time. But what can be more challenging for people to deal with is when it just happens, so to speak, like the infidelity just begins, but then they're in it and they're like, wait a second, this is really great in some ways. I may feel awful about what I'm doing in some respects, but this is also speaking to things within me that I know I need to take seriously, even if I'm doing something that goes against commitments I've made or priorities that I have or values that I hold dear to me, right? That's when the conflict gets really sticky.
And that's when they call you.
That's when they call me. Yeah.
Without being judgmental, I'm using that word a lot, I apologize.
It's okay.
Is it fair to assume the serial cheater is more calculating and intentional in their actions?
Sometimes. Sometimes yes, but to be frank, and this isn't a judgment of anyone. If you're carrying on an affair, even if you only have one affair in your entire life, if you're carrying on an affair for any length of time, you're probably going to have to be calculating and devious to pull that off too. Having the tolerance to do that multiple times usually looks different in practice than having the tolerance to do that once, like within the duration of one relationship, one affair relationship. But it's really a matter of frequency more than quality, or quantity more than quality, I would say.
Do you start by getting a burner phone, or how does it happen?
Well, some people do. Not everyone does. And by the way, boys and girls, if you don't want to get caught cheating, good digital hygiene is really important. Like all of the obvious stuff that you think you should be doing, you should definitely be doing it if you don't want to get caught.
So my listeners and viewers know I'm a big country fan, and there's one song about being cheated on. Go
sure
surprise,
there are
right?
Lots of country songs.
So
about
it's
being cheated.
Two women sing it. One was cheated on, the other one was the cheater.
Okay.
But it talks about how her husband comes home and like he immediately jumps in the shower, and she spends half an hour like going through his phone and checking emails and texts. And so yes, good digital hygiene is great. Great suggestion there.
Yeah.
Are more of your clients first-time or one-time cheaters, or do you tend to counsel more serial cheaters?
I do have more first-time cheaters, or if not first time, then like first significant time, right? Like here's what I mean by that. Like we've been sort of talking about like serial cheaters and one-time cheaters as if there is a clear line between those two groups. But sometimes people like had like a minor dalliance with someone in the past and that counted as cheating, but they didn't think too much of it and they didn't do it again and again and again and again. So technically they may be coming to me like the second time they've cheated within a particular relationship. So it's not that they're a first time cheater, but they're also not exactly a serial cheater either, right? People tend to come to me when they're like, there's something serious going on here that I really want to address.
We need different grade levels of your cheatiness, apparently.
Right. Maybe so.
Does your counseling approach differ when working with one-time cheaters versus serial cheaters?
It sometimes does. And again, this goes back to the possibility, not the certainty, but the possibility that serial cheaters are kind of compulsively cheating to get away from a larger discomfort in their lives, or the discomfort that lots of us experience simply as a result of being human and by dealing with difficult human things that they don't know how to address, right? Now, we all experience discomfort. So it's not that folks who cheat once or cheat very infrequently don't experience any of that. They certainly do. But with habitual cheating, often a component of what's going on is that there's this big wound that needs to be healed. And that isn't as often the case with the one time or the less frequent cheating.
There's an old saying, and perhaps a bitter one. It's one of those blanket statements that you don't like. Once a cheater, always a cheater.
Yeah.
How successful are people who get counseling and those who don't at repairing their relationships?
Well, let me speak to that in a moment. And let me just say first that I don't see that the once a cheater, always a cheater thing is true. Some people do cheat habituously. There I go again, habituously.
We'll have to put in the dictionary now.
Habitually and continuously. Some people do that. That is a thing. That is true. And a lot of people don't do that. A lot of people cheat once and they say, I never want to do this again. Right? A lot of people say, like, I don't want to engage in infidelity. This has happened. I may not have planned it. It may be happening, but I want to deal with it and then not do this anymore. So if you don't want to be always a cheater, you don't have to always be a cheater. And if you're on the receiving side of somebody else's infidelity situation, you do not have to assume that because someone has cheated on you once, they will necessarily cheat on you again. Could it happen? Yes. Does it happen? Yes. Will it necessarily happen? Absolutely not. Yeah. And then the other part of your question, sorry, remind me what that was after the once a cheater, always a cheater.
About repairing the relationships.
Oh, right. Yeah. So what I find is that when folks want to repair relationships, there's a good chance they'll be successful. But the problem is that there's this narrative out there that if you've cheated, what you're supposed to do is confess and then do everything you can to repair the relationship, and that should make everything okay. And that isn't necessarily what's going to work for everybody. For some people, going back to the primary relationship isn't what they want. And it doesn't work very well when we try to do things that we really don't want to do.
You just read my next question about having to confess that to their spouse, so I'll just throw that one away. But maybe as a follow-up to that, is it possible for someone who has had an affair to be fully happy in their marriage ever again?
Yes, it is possible, and it certainly happens. It absolutely happens. Does it always happen? No. And part of what I consider most important about my work with clients is helping people get rigorously and ruthlessly honest with themselves about what they want and what they don't want. We do not do our partners any favor if we cheat on them and then we try to go back and repair the relationship and we don't really want to. That's not helpful for anybody. But to echo what I said a moment ago, since there's so much societal pressure to do exactly that, a lot of people feel like that's really their only viable option. And this just leads to a lot of suffering all around. That said, when folks are like, yeah, I want to reinvest in my marriage or I want to reinvest in my primary relationship, they can and they do. And sometimes everybody works out or, ends up happier a year later than they ever could have imagined they would ever be. That's definitely an outcome that's possible.
As a follow-up to that, what about relationships that start as affairs?
Yeah.
Can they ever be successful, or relationships that start as affairs doomed to fail?
No, they're not doomed to fail. A lot of affair relationships flourish and turn into happy, ongoing, mutually satisfying non-affair relationships, right? I think it's because of the stigma associated with infidelity and our very uniformly negatives about infidelity that we assume that if a relationship starts as an affair, it's tainted by default and it will never survive as a non-affair relationship because it's just inherently bad. And that's simply not the case. Now, that doesn't mean that all relationships that start as affairs work out. But that's true of all relationships. Even relationships that don't start as affairs don't always work out, right? We have to keep things in the appropriate perspective. We tend to think about the differences between affair relationships and non-affair relationships, or relationships that start as affairs and relationships that don't start as affairs. And they are different in some ways, but they're also similar in a lot of ways. And we tend to lose focus or lose sight of that.
I've seen articles in the past about ways to supposedly, air quote, affair-proof a relationship. Is it possible to affair-proof a marriage or significant relationship? And if so, how does somebody accomplish that?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. A lot of so-called relationship experts will tell you that it is possible to affair-proof a relationship. And I have to respectfully disagree with that. And here's why. You can never fully control what another person does. You can do all the things that people tell you to do to quote unquote affair-proof a relationship. And you still do not have total control over what your partner does. And that's just the end of the story. Now, are there things you can do to continuously nurture a relationship so that hopefully both parties are reasonably satisfied in it and so that cheating is less likely to occur? Sure. But I think the point of doing that is not to prevent an affair. It's to enjoy your relationship. And I think that sometimes people lose sight of that. It's we're so concerned about preventing affairs that we forget about nurturing and sustaining an enjoyable connection with someone we care about, right? It's a slightly different way of saying the same thing, but I think it's an important difference.
No, I totally agree. I appreciate that viewpoint. As we've said, your role as a non-judgmental coach for people involved in infidelity is extremely unique. How do you see the field of infidelity counseling evolving in the next 5, 10, or 20 years? And will there be more professionals like you?
Well, I sure hope there are. I mean, I truly believe this about not just infidelity related stuff, but everything. If we want to heal any situation, if we want to improve any situation, if we want to make any situation different, we have to look at all parts of that situation and offer compassion and respect to whatever the humans are doing, right? I wish more people would recycle and compost. Does getting mad about that help anything? Not really, right? I wish we polluted less. Does me getting all hot and bothered about that help? Not really. So if we want things around infidelity to shift, if we want it to be a less difficult thing, and if we even want infidelity to occur less frequently, or perhaps to deal with it in a more helpful way when it does occur, we have to start recognizing that even if we don't like this is a very common human thing. We don't have to look at this as the most terrible thing in the world. And we can have just as much compassion and respect for people who are doing the cheating as for people who are being cheated on. And that just helps de-escalate the whole thing and make it less of a dire problem. And when we take something as a puzzle that can be solved rather than a big, bad, awful problem that has to be fixed, we gain more options for our next steps forward, whatever those may be, right?
We've got about 4 or 5 minutes left.
Yeah.
You have your own podcast, excuse me, and you've recorded many episodes. We're talking during the break. It's almost 200. So I know the work involved. So congrats.
Thank you.
And it's on many aspects of infidelity.
Yes.
How can people connect with your podcast, and how can they learn even more about you and your practice, and how can they connect with you directly?
Absolutely. So my podcast is called Your Secret is Safe with Me. And I talk about infidelity from a non-judgmental perspective, but frankly, a lot of my episodes have bearing on all romantic relationships, not just relationships that have some sort of an infidelity component. And you can find Your Secret is Safe with Me wherever you access podcasts or on my website, mariemurphyphd.com. And the best way to connect with me is to go to my website, mariemurphyphd.com. You can use my contact form or the email address that is on the website to shoot me a message. You can also book an introductory coaching session with me through my website, which is the way that you can start working with me one-on-one if you're interested in doing so. I offer compassionate, confidential coaching via Zoom, which means we can work together no matter where you're located. And last but not least, I also offer a self-guided course, which is called You're Not the Only One, which is the title of our episode today, I think. And this course contains my most powerful teachings and assignments that go beyond what I offer on my podcast. And once you purchase this DIY course, you have access to it in an online portal that you get to have forever. You get to keep it for all time.
Awesome. Next step forward is all about personal empowerment and well-being, overcoming resilience in the face of adversity. Certainly, there are many different dynamics in play when someone engages in an affair or their partner is involved in an affair. Some people need help with personal empowerment, some with resilience, and all of them need help with their well-being. Would you take us into our conversation with advice or a story that helps our audience feel more resilient, empowered, and at peace?
Yeah. So first thing I want to say is that I think one of the things about infidelity that has bearing on things that aren't related to infidelity is that when we think we have an unsolvable problem on our hands, and when we think there isn't any support out there for the kind of problem that we have, we tend to get really stuck. And what I want everybody to know is that if you think you have a problem on your hands that's unsolvable, it probably isn't. If you think that there isn't any help for the kind of problem that you're dealing with right now, you're probably wrong. Help is probably out there, and it may just be a matter of that next Google search to find it. So if you're dealing with a significant life challenge, keep going. Keep taking that next step forward, whatever it is. Help is out there if you need it. Keep looking. The other thing I want to say is that creating this job for myself, creating this role of non-judgmental infidelity coach is one of the hardest things I've ever done. People were like, you can't help people who cheat. Like, nobody's going to want to work with you. Nobody's going to want to talk to you. Like, what you're doing is bad and wrong. You're like aiding and abetting cheaters. Like, this is terrible. Like, you should just like crawl into a hole and die, basically. Sometimes you have to really be willing to write your own script. Sometimes you have to do things that nobody sees the vision of just yet. And it's hard, but that doesn't mean you can't do it. And so to everybody who's thinking that they can't be what they want, or they can't have what they want, or they can't do what they want to do, I encourage you to think again. And I mean, I keep saying this because it's the name of your show, but I really do mean it. Like, take that next step forward. You may not be able to do it all at once, but if you keep on taking one step forward at a time, you will amaze yourself by what's possible.
Dr. Marie Murphy, we could talk about this for hours. Thank you for being with us today.
My pleasure.
Will you come back again?
Of course, anytime.
Awesome. I'm Chris Meek. We're out of time. We'll see you next week, same time, same place. Until then, stay safe and keep taking your next steps forward.